We mentioned last week portions of Nebraska corn and soybean fields were recovering from recent storms. To reiterate the point, in Clay County, estimations from damage include nearly 170,000 affected acres of corn and more than 87,000 acres of soybeans. Tamra Jackson-Ziems joined us previously to talk about potential stalk rot issues in those cornfields. And this week she's with us again to discuss how hail can not only damage the stalk, but also cause major problems when harvesting and storing the grain.
The same principle applies, and this probably has more longer-reaching effects because everywhere a hailstone impacts an ear is another open wound, allowing some of those common ear rot pathogens coming in. And we're seeing a lot of ear rots developing already in some of those fields.
Are they in the most severe, or is it spread out even for the ones that were more mild?
Both, actually, and so the severity and higher frequency of injury just increases the incidence of our diseases that we're talking about. And so this is really important for people to monitor in those damaged fields.
What does a farmer need to look at if he or she wants to go out and scout her field? If they've had hail damage, what do they need to look for to see if there is some ear rot going on?
Well, some of these may not be immediately obvious to them, and so as they're walking through some of these fields, looking for maybe ears that have begun to turn, and so husks that have begun to turn brown already. In the mornings, they might even see some fuzz. It might look like fuzz. It's the fungal growth on some of those ears and discoloration. Those are ones they'll want to husk back to take a closer look at, and especially where they see those bruises and some of the wounds.
Here's the difficult part. What do you do about it?
Well, that's really the scary part, and the most important, I think, too. And so if you've identified areas where you do have quite a bit of ear rot disease, it is very important to remember that those fungi will continue to grow in the bin. And the only way to keep them from doing so will be to dry the corn down. And it's the drier, the better, to extend the storage life. And so even a single point difference between 15% and 14% moisture can up to double the storage life of that corn. But certainly getting it below 15% if you have a lot of these ear rot diseases is critical, or don't store it at all. Use that worst corn first.
A lot of producers in Nebraska have probably had two back-to-back nasty years, especially in dry land situations. Last year we talked to you about mycotoxins and the problems that farmers would face with that, and elevators were testing for that for a long time. They were testing and rejecting some loads because they had toxins in them. What do you expect this year? Do you expect to see anything like that?
Well, it really depends on the part of the state you're in and how much damage you may have gotten. And so in parts of the state, like in the southeast, we've had we don't have as much irrigation, and we've had some very hot conditions in the last week. And so those hot, dry conditions promote aflatoxin accumulation. But just because you have the ear rot disease doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have mycotoxin accumulation. This year, probably a less problematic year than last year for aflatoxin accumulation. Now, the other mycotoxins could be something we'd want to watch, especially if the grain is going to be used for monogastric animals because they're more sensitive. So fusarium infections, there are other mycotoxins like fumonisin that could accumulate in there.
What are the storage things just to recap, the storage things that you need to keep in mind with that?
Keep it dry, keep it aerated, and so store it in a way that you would think about storing something at your home to keep it fresh. And so dry conditions and cool conditions are the best. And so cool your grain and dry it as dry as you can get it.